Here's an Emerson mini tube type AM radio, and I was trying to find the model number on this, but I just couldn't see it. It's got a serial number. Maybe the model is 42-9. Oh, here it is. It's kind of hard to see it though. It's stamped back on this back cover. But this is a full-featured super heterodyne 5-tube radio, just in a miniature package. It uses variable inductors for tuning. They're the inductors for the RF and the oscillator stages. There's an old electrolytic cardboard case capacitor. So we'll just replace the usual, or fix the usual problems on these old radios, which is bad capacitors and bad wiring. Right here you notice brittle wiring on the output transformer, brittle rubber wiring. So we're going to put heat shrink tubing on, insulate those wires all the way up to the core, and let's take a look underneath here. Looks like someone replaced an electrolytic or a paper cap there at one time. This is still paper, even though it's plastic cased. It's paper inside and still can tend to be just as bad as the other type. Looks like an old capacitor blew apart here. These are all old paper caps. Another paper cap out here. And this has the second IF can underneath the chassis, just to save space. Here's the first IF. So it's got all the circuitry of a regular 5-tube radio, just in a miniature case. It even has a dial lamp on it and a slide rule type dial. So now the first thing I'll do is try and round up the capacitors. I've got a few more ordered for other things coming in, but I think I probably have enough to do this. This one might be a little bit more difficult because the space is so compact. Now I've got this first capacitor replaced here. I'm going to use the heat gun on some of this brittle wiring, make it a little bit more pliable so I can put the heat shrink tubing on it. I'm just going to heat up that wire, because it'll just shatter if I try to bend it. Don't get it too hot. We don't want to melt it. So let's see if I can move it. Yeah, see, I can move it a little bit more easily now. I just want to keep it intact long enough to get the heat shrink tubing on there. So let me get the tubing on there and then we'll complete the repair. Here's the completed repair on the wire. Got two thicknesses of heat shrink tubing on there for the best insulation. And I'm just going to splice it onto a modern wire to run it where it needs to go. Down under here. So I need a little bit more length on the wire to get it down there. Now I've got all the old capacitors replaced. Because this was kind of cramped, it was a little bit more difficult to do it, but I was able to replace all of them. And I put on a new polarized power cord. This radio has the power line ground connected directly to the chassis. And usually these radios with no power transformer and a metal chassis will use a isolation capacitor between an isolated ground bus and the chassis, or they'll have it inside of a enclosed case with plastic shafts on the controls and an interlock. I don't know that this quite even measured up to the safety standards of the, maybe it measured up to the standards of the time, but it's not a very safe design, not even as good as most were at that time. So I've got it powered up on an isolation transformer now. I did wire with a polarized power cord so the neutral side of the AC line goes to the chassis, but I still don't know if I quite trust it without an isolation transformer. Now I'll give a performance demonstration. This works really good because it's really got the same components as a larger 5-tube radio. Only thing is the speaker's a little tinny sounding, so I don't know if I can repair that. It may be that the cone is kind of getting stuck on the voice coil somehow. I did have to replace the 35W4 tube. The one that was in there wasn't producing any DC for some reason.
We can help us. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Inspire USA Foundation, and the Ad Council.
CBS 7 News.
Tracking severe weather in West Texas means covering a lot of ground.
Against the facilities that are brought to them. If that were not the case, I would gladly admit it, but unfortunately it's true.
Among the many English translations available today, only 3 are currently approved by the Holy See for use in the liturgy in the United States. These 3 liturgical versions are the 1970s edition of the New American Bible, the translation used in the American Lectionary,
Lawrence, and coming next, everyone knows about the pageantry, the spectacle of the World Cup. But a closer look at a dark side of this international event is just ahead. You're listening to FIFA World Cup Today on ESPN Radio and ESPNRadio.com.
Okay, now I'll go ahead and put it back in its cabinet. Now here's the radio in its case. It only had one knob on it when I got it, so I'll have to try and see if I can find a knob that fits on it a little bit better.
Human trafficking, recruiting people through force or deception to exploit them, either in the sex trade or for slave-like labor. When you hear Chinese national, does your antenna go up that there could potentially be trafficking?
Oh, we know that the trafficking is some of the worst trafficking we're seeing amongst Southeast Asians and Chinese, and if the
said that the quotation of biblical documents by early Christian writers is so extensive that the entire New Testament could be reconstructed from them without the use
Sodium and magnesium in your water. Now, salt softeners replace those minerals with 2 times the amount of sodium.
He's hot. I know. He wants to take me to the island in his private plane.
Oh, I bet that would be fun.